Hello lovely people, I'm K3N and welcome to Wonky Wednesday. Now in this video I'm going to look at Manx quilting. Manx quilting originated on the Isle of Man, which is an island between the northwest coast of England and Ireland in the Irish Sea. And actually I was born in Blackpool, which is a town on the northwest coast of England. And in Blackpool there is a tower called the Blackpool Tower, and from the top of it on a clear day you can actually see the Isle of Man. Anyway, Manx quilting will look very familiar to quilters, even if you haven't heard of it, because it looks like a log cabin, you know, the American log cabin quilt. But actually it predates it. I have looked it up. The earliest Manx quilts are found from the 1820s, or the earliest references to it, whereas log cabin quilts came in about the 1870s or so. So whether Manx quilting influenced log cabins or whether they were just whether people came up with them independently of each other, you know, I don't know, I couldn't find that out. But anyway, it's interesting, connections, you know, textile connections. So for me, the fascinating thing about how they're made is that they use very minimal supplies. The Isle of Man is an island. It's about 5 hours by ferry from the mainland of England. So getting supplies would have been very problematic and expensive. So the only tools they would use, apart from scraps of cloth from old clothing and so on, would be a knife to make a little nick in the cloth, which they then tore, and a needle and some thread, and that's all you need. And all the measuring and so on is done with your own two hands, and I just love that. So anyway, so I've made some blocks already, and I've used just 2 different cloths, but you could use, and you could make them scrappy. You know, I've gone with the light and dark, but you don't have to. You could just make them completely scrappy. I've done the centre square red to represent the hearth. Sorry, I'm a bit out of breath. Breathe, Catherine. I just ran upstairs. I don't know why I ran, but anyway. Yeah, so you could make them completely scrappy, but I've just gone with these two different cloths because I want to make some cushions. I've got a new sofa coming for my studio, which is blue, so anyway, I thought I'd make a cushion. So I'm going to make 4. I've made 3 blocks already, and I'm going to make the 4th one to show you. So I'm going to lay them out. I haven't decided yet whether I'll do them, you know, like that, with the 4th one here, or the blue to the middle. So anyway, I'll set those aside and we'll make one. So they're stitched onto a foundation square. So I've got here a bit of old sheet, and the width, the dimension of your square is determined by the span of your hand. So every quilt would be, you know, that's a consistent size, but it would obviously vary between quilters. So it makes the quilt very personal to you, which I liked. Now I've seen some people talking about it and they measure the span of their hand and then go and rotary cut. I want to do it, you know, as authentically as possible, so I'm not going to use a knife and rip it with my teeth. That would be going too far. I'm trying to find a straight edge on this bit of old sheet. This is quite fine cotton as well, so it doesn't get too thick, you know, when you're stitching. Right, I'll do it here. So I'm just going to go like that. No, I'm not. I'm going to go like that and then cut underhand. It's a bit awkward to do it here at the desk. And I'm just going to try not to cut my finger. Make a snip. Was I in shot? I did that. So I'm right-handed, so I spanned my left hand, making sure I had a straight tear here already. And then I made a snip there like that. And then I'll tear that. And what you could then do, because that was a bit awkward for me, what you could then do is then use this to measure your other foundation squares, you know, however many you want to make. So then to get a square, I'm just going to fold it on the diagonal, like that. I'm in shot, yet. Snip there, and tear there. So there's my square. And I don't know how big it is. I don't care how big it is. Like I said, I'm making a cushion. I guess if you had a cushion already, you'd need it to fit. So, you know, you might want to measure and tweak, but I'm sure you can work that out for yourself. I'm just going with this. It's the size of my hand. Now for the centre square, your bit of red. Traditionally, that is the, I'm holding my hand that way up so I'm not rude. Traditionally, it's the length of your middle finger. So I do the same thing again. I sort of trapped it. Can you see what I'm doing? Again, I better do it on my, yeah, no, that is my left hand. So I've got the cloth laying up against my middle finger. Just, can you see? And then I'll snip at the end of my middle finger, again being careful not to cut my fingers. I have great respect for people doing this with a knife. Snip there, and then tear. And then do the same thing. Get rid of my straggly bits. Do exactly the same thing as I did before to make a square. It's just so liberating not worrying about what size it is. Snip, and that's a square. So that's my hearth square. Get rid of my bits and bobs. And then for the strips that go around the edges, that measurement is taken from your thumb, and it's from the base of your thumb to the base of your thumbnail, so that distance. So what I did there was I got my cloth, it's quite a big bit, but, and just did the same thing again. Whoops, I'm sorry if it's making it go blurry, wafting it about. As a similar thing to what I did with my finger, so I held it there in between my thumb, you know, from between where my thumb meets my hand, and then I sort of lined up with the base of my thumbnail and made a snip. And then I'll do this to one side because it's so big. I'm just tearing. I can hear the tearing. So there's my strip. So once you've done all that, like I said, you could then use these pieces then to measure your other pieces rather than, you know, you want to carry on using your hand if you find that handier. Sorry. So I need some of my other cloth. I'm going to just use my strip that I just tore to tear another strip off my other cloth. So I'm just going to, you know, marry it up somewhat like that. Snip. So if you're going with scrappy, you could just, you know, get yourself some strips. Sorry, a lot of tearing, long bit of cloth. If Glorious Mike is listening, I'm tearing cloth, Mike. Sorry, that's a bit of a joke from the Weekly Slow Stitch where a lady's husband heard me tearing cloth and wondered what it was. So there we go. So I've got, you know, if you wanted scrappy, you could go and tear yourself several strips and just arrange them dark and light if that was the way you were going. Now the next thing to do is to place your centre square in the centre. And how they would do that is they will fold this foundation square on the diagonal and then finger press that crease, open it up, turn it, and do it the same thing across the other diagonal and finger press that crease. Whoops, it's better to do it on a firm surface. I've got my green cloth, but I'll manage. And then you can take your hearth square, and then if you line each point of your square on those crease lines, you know, those diagonal crease lines, that will now be central. Just going to roll my sleeves up because they're getting in my way. And then I'm just going to put a pin in the middle to hold it there. And I'm going to hold it up. I'm sure it's clear what I mean. Can you see? So the corners of my square are lined up with those diagonal crease lines. So once you've done that, the next thing you need to do is you need to make yourself some guidelines around the edge to place your strips. And that again is just done by folding. So you make sure I'm in shot, I am. So you take your one side and you fold it until that raw edge of that foundation piece lines up with the raw edge of your hearth square, and then you put a finger press in there. If you want to go ironing, you know, go ironing. So there's a crease. Now without unfolding it, you fold it again and you line that crease up again with the edge of your hearth square, and then you finger press again. And it is worth checking with your foundation cloth before you choose it that it holds a nice crease. Polycotton wouldn't, you know, because you need those creases. And then when you unfold it, you'll see that you've got 3 crease lines here, here, and here. Now you don't have to do this because you'll be able to see. I'm going to put a pencil line just so you can see. I can see the creases, but I want you to be able to see. So I'm just going to draw a pencil line where the creases are, just so you can see them. 2. But that's only for you because I'm videoing, okay? So then you go and do the same thing on all 4 sides. So you fold, get rid of those, fold your raw edge, match your raw edge of your foundation square to your centre square and crease, and then fold again, matching that fold to the square and crease. And again, I'm just going to quickly draw lines because I did a little test and then looked back, and you can't see the creases clearly. And I want you to be able to, so I'm just going to take the time to just do this quickly. And fold the same thing this side. Crease, crease. And it's possible, if you really take the time over this and make sure everything's creased, you know, and lined up, to be super accurate without any rotary cutting or rulers or anything. It's possible to be super accurate if that bothers, you know, if you want to be. But it's also possible to just do it wonky, and it is also fine. But that's one of the things that I loved about it, is that you can be accurate without all that paraphernalia that we normally, sorry, it's going a bit wibbly. If you do this and you do want to draw lines because it's easier for you, I would recommend doing it on a firm surface and not on that. I've got one more side. Fold and fold and crease. Also, if you did press them with the iron, it might stay, it might be more, you know. Depends on your foundation cloth. This is quite old sheet, so it's a bit thin. Just to reiterate, you do not have to do this drawing. This is not traditional to do this drawing. I'm only doing it so you can see. Right, there we go, before people start saying things to me in the comments. Anyway, so there we go, so I'm ready to go. So now I've got some thread for piecing. I've chosen this in the hope that you can see it, but normally you would match your thread, you know, or use a neutral thread. And the sewing also is delightfully rustic, traditionally. Because the block is, I mean, obviously the stitches are holding things together, but it's also sort of structurally held together by all the folding that goes on. So the stitching can be just quite big and utilitarian, which is also quite liberating. So I just got myself a length of this, and I'm going to tie a knot. Now they don't traditionally layer it and put batting in or anything like that, and they obviously would not have built it on a batting square because they didn't have batting. They would have used probably old sheets. So what you see, I'll just show you on the back of here, where I did use tone on tone thread, so I hope you can see it. So I'm just going to stand up to make sure you can see. You will, this is the back, this will be the back of, if you made a quilt, this would be the back of your quilt. You wouldn't add anything else. I'm going to make a cushion, so it won't matter if it's wonky, but actually it wasn't too bad. But do you see that the stitching lines come out round and round? But all this to say is, if you are making a quilt, all your knots and everything need to be on the front, because they'll all be hidden. If you knot on the back, you'll be able to see it. So I'm going to lay my first log strip. I've got some bits that I used on the others leftovers here, so I'm going to use these up first. They're the same width as those. And actually it doesn't matter if the width varies, you'll see why in a minute. So I'm matching that. If it had a right side, I'd be putting it right sides together with the edge of the hearth square, let's call it. Let's get rid of that ruler because it makes noise. And then I'm going to just trim that in line with that hearth square. I'm taking a bit of fluff off the hearth square as well, but it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to get my knotted thread. Now you want to start kind of 1/4 of an inch in from the edge-ish. And you want to do a seam that is about 1/4 of an inch, but again it's not important if it's slightly one way or the other. I'll start with the back stitch just because I won't start with the back stitch because it will show on the back. So I'm just going to straight away go into a running stitch, just that's a comfortable size for me to stitch. So it's got all kinds of connections. I'm thinking back to Kawandi, which I did in the weekly slow stitch, where it was pieced and quilted at the same time in effect. And you know, I just keep seeing these connections between these textile traditions. Okay, so you want to stop 1/4 of an inch in from the end of the seam. Don't stitch right to the end. And then but you want your needle to go through to the back of your work. So I'm going in there. Can you see I've left a gap of, you know, 1/4 of an inch-ish. And I'm going to pull the needle through to the back and just leave it hanging there. And then I'm going to take this that I've just sewn, only this, and leave the hearth square laying. And then I'm going to fold it up, and I want to match this raw edge with my first creased line here. Like that. And press it down. So I'm not doing what you would usually do, which is pressing right up against the stitching line. I'm going to join that, line that up with the first pressed line, which I've drawn so you can see it. Do you see? So you end up here with a little pleat of cloth. And then I'm going to just put a little pin in that just to hold it in place. And I was pinning sort of down here this way so that when I come to sew later the pin's not in the way. And then you turn it through 90 degrees and now you're ready to put your next log here. So I'm going to take this piece which is nearly the right length, lay it on, match it. The big dog's come upstairs again, he keeps coming upstairs lately. I'm going to match it, you know, I want it to be this length. Good boy, go down. And trim it. I find it safer to put a nick and then lift it up and trim. Then there's no danger of cutting through my work. And lay that on there. Now this is a little bit counterintuitive, but trust me. I'll put a pin just because it's easier while I'm filming. One less thing to worry about. So I'm just going to put a pin just to hold that a minute. Because what I want to show you on the back now, and you see that's my previous line of stitching. The next seam I'm going to stitch this way. So I'm just going to take my first stitch in that direction. So I'm going under a right angle through to the front of my work. And then when I turn it over, do you see I'm coming up here? I'm not coming up here. And that doesn't matter. That will get sewn down once you come round. So that's correct. Took me a while to accept that, but it is. So then you just come up to the right side, to the, you know, the good side of your work again, and then you stitch away. So you just stitch all the way along, roughly, rustically, whatever makes you happy, in somewhere in the region of 1/4 of an inch, but you see you've got that pleat, that fold when you fold it, so there's quite a lot of wiggle room. Your seam allowance could be, you know, one side or the other. So, and then you want to stop somewhere before the end. Again, in the region of 1/4 of an inch, but it really is in the region. But you want to go through with your needle and thread to the back, like that, and leave it laying. And then you take this one again and you match up that raw edge of that log with the first line that you see, your pleated, you know, your creased line. And then you finger press your seam, and that's your second log. And again, you've got this little pleat. And I'll put a pin. In fact, I can steal this pin now because that centre hearth is held down. And then you turn. Oh dear, that's serious, there's tummy rumbling. And I've buried all my, oh, I can use one of these. And then you take, in this case I'm going to take my lights. But you know, you take whatever. If you want to go 2 darks, 2 lights, 2 darks, 2 lights, you can, otherwise you can just be scrappy. Do you see there that I didn't trim that short enough? It doesn't matter. I'll just line this up with this, not with that. And leave that in there rather than try to trim that. And then I'll trim this off. Oops. Lay it on. Get my needle back. And the same thing again. So that's my previous stitch line there, and now I'm going to stitch that way. So I just take my next stitch under a right angle and come through to the front. And you see I'm coming up there. So I'm catching the fold of this previous piece, but I'm not starting from the beginning of the seam. And it's fine, it works. They knew a thing or two, those Manx people. And then you just sew along there. And you see my seam is way bigger than 1/4 of an inch, but it really doesn't matter. And then I've nearly to the end, so I don't want to stitch right to the end again. I'm going to take my last stitch down through and leave a bit at the end. Go through to the back, leave that laying. Take this, line it up with that first line of my creased grid, which I drew so you could see. I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over. I don't mean to talk to you like you're idiots. I'm sorry if it comes across as that. Put a pin in it and turn. Now I want another light. But do you see, it doesn't even matter if your strips vary slightly in width, because it's this that keeps you accurate, because you're always folding to these lines. So the excess or whatever is within the structure of the strip. I just love that about it. Cut that to length. Lay it on, right sides together always, if you had a, you know, cloth that had a right side. And then get my needle. Whoops, oh dear. And I've pinned it underneath, hang on. I've pinned my thread. Let's get that out, I don't think it's really necessary. And then on the back, you're coming this way, now you want to go that way. So you just take your next stitch under a right angle, like that. And then you come through there. I think I will put that pin back in actually. Try not to pin it to the desk, Catherine. That would not be helpful. So I've come up through there and I'm ready to just stitch along here. Just enjoying the sound of the thread going through the cloth. But you know, even if you've never done any quilting of any kind in your life, and you're not a quilter, you know, at all, you could do this. So I've taken my needle through to the back, I've stopped, you know, before the end. I fold that up to the line and finger press. And put a pin and try not to pin my thread. and turn. So that's one complete round done. So now I'm going to start my next round. Lay it on, trim it, come through from the back at a right angle. Can you see? Have you got the idea of that? Make sure it doesn't move. I could put a pin in it, but... and then stitch away. And you'll end up doing 4 rounds. You'll have 4 logs each side. Because you've got 3 crease lines, so that leaves 4 spaces. Because your last crease line will be your outside edge. So go through to the back. Once you get into the rhythm of it, it's quite straightforward, you know, and enjoyable to do, which to me is the most important thing. I'm just moving my pin up into that next log, turn, blue, I am in awe. I have got a knife here. I did bring my pocket knife up. I thought I might try, you know, in the interests of being authentic, but then I thought, no, I won't. I won't. That's a recipe for disaster. But they would have just taken the cloth and nicked it with a knife and then torn it, rather than snipping it with scissors. They say necessity is the mother of invention. Come through. See, I'm way down there. I think maybe that is... I'm just going to have a look if that is really too far down. Yeah, I don't think I'd have enough to fold. So all I'm going to do there, apparently I stopped a bit early. All I'm going to do there is take 1 more stitch in the same direction. Like that. And now I'm closer to 1/4 inch. So yeah, I always like a technique that's got some wiggle room in it. And your thing still comes out looking nice. Yeah, when I make cushions these days, I don't go and buy, you know, a new cushion pad. I make a cover, an inner cover, a lining, I suppose you'd call it, from a bit of old sheet, because I've got a lot of old sheets. And then I just stuff it with whatever I've got. You know, I've got, at the moment, I'm working on an old duvet that's no good as a duvet anymore. And that is poly stuffing. So through to the back, lay your needle down, fold up. But I'd rather use that, you know, recycle that than go and buy a new cushion pad. So what that is all to say that it means it doesn't matter what size my cover is. I'll make my cover and then I'll make my lining, my inner, to fit. So turn and I'm back to my light colour. Oh, I didn't move my pin. This is some of the tea and rust printed. Oh no, it's not actually, no. This is some cloth that I rust printed a long time ago. It's a bit of old sheet. But and it was very orangey because it was in the days when I used to rust print with vinegar as an assist to make the rust oxidise. And I didn't like it anymore, so I put it in tea and it's gone a much nicer colour. So I'm going to take my stitch under a right angle and come through and see if is it okay. It's more like 1/2 inch, but I think it's okay. If you come up like I did before and you're too far down here, just go back and take another stitch in that direction to get you into the right place. But I'm going to try this 1/2 inch seam to see if it still is okay. Looking at it, I think it will be. I'm hopeful. You could even, you know, this seam doesn't even have to be straight. It could be completely cattywampus because it's going to be completely hidden. The only thing is on the back of your work it would be a bit crooked, but if that doesn't bother you, then it's not an issue. I'm just thinking, you know, with the invention of rotary cutters and quilters' rulers and gridded cutting mats and all that, I wonder if I wonder which came first, the chicken or the egg. I wonder which came first, our desire for accuracy or the invention of those things. Do you see what I mean? I wonder if because we have those things, and so we could be accurate, that is imposing an accuracy upon us. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like my husband says that since the invention of the vacuum cleaner, people's houses have to be cleaner. Whereas in the olden times, when you just changed the straw a couple of times a year, you know, or swept, standards were lower or different. I wonder if it's the same with it. It seems logical to me that it would be, you know, the same with patchwork and quilting and dressmaking and everything. Whereas this takes you back to using the tools that you've got, which are your own two hands. You know, highly underrated, one's hands. And I've very much in favour of minimal tools. I've got all the stuff because I used to do, you know, patchwork and quilting and in that style and with a machine and, you know, so on and so forth. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm not remotely saying there is. But just for me now, I just like to do things as minimally as possible with, you know, minimal tools, because I like to be able to take things and work on them wherever I want to. So I'm putting my next stitch under a right angle, coming up in more or less the right place. So I suppose maybe those two things kind of happened side by side. Rulers and things were invented, and so people could be more accurate, so they invented, you know, other things or other rulers, and then rotary cutting and gridded cutting mats and all that kind of thing. But if you just pare it right back to what is your aim, my aim is to have, in this case, a nice cushion for my sofa that I'm happy to look at, that I've enjoyed making. That's my aim. My aim is not to have something that's precision made, luckily. But with this simple way of doing these grid lines, you end up with something that is pretty much accurate without any stress or bother. Now that thread's too short, so I'm going to finish it off on this side, because this will be hidden, just by doing a couple of back stitches. I'm not going to take it through to the back. Even though it's a cushion, I'm just going to show you that's how you would finish off. And I'm not going to fold yet, because I'm going to rethread my needle and get it where it should be. She said. So this is going to be in two parts. So this week I'm doing this, making a block, and next week I'm going to show you how to join the blocks together. And so I'm just going to literally just go through where I would if I'd carried on stitching. I've got a knot in my thread, and lay it down, fold it up. And then I'll see how the joining goes, you know, how long it takes. And if it doesn't take hours and hours to show you that, I'll talk you through how I make cushion covers in my super basic way. A loose thread there. Actually, part of the cloth, so I'll just snip it back. Because I don't do zips or anything like that, I just do a simple pillowcase type thing. So I'll just show you how I do that if I have time. So the Manx quilting will be a two-part, but you should know enough to be able to go and make a whole quilt if you want to. Although traditionally, the Isle of Man is quite cold, being in the Irish Sea. It's quite northerly. And traditionally they weren't really made as to keep a bed warm. They would have them on a bed, I do believe, but then they had rag rugs on the floor. And then at night they would throw the rag rug on the bed as well for extra warmth. So just come through under a right angle. I'm half an inch away, but it worked okay last time, so I'm going to go with it. Stitch along. You obviously can when it's getting bigger like this, and maybe I should have put a couple of pins in to hold it, but they didn't use pins, so I won't. Well, I have, but you know. I won't use pins here for this bit. Go through to the back. Fold up to my line, finger press, move my pin, turn. You see, it's just a few steps. Once you get your head around it, it's very mindful and therapeutic to do. Take this stitch under a right angle in the other direction. Again, I'm half an inch away, but it doesn't matter apparently, so all it means there is that there's just a bit less in your fold, you know, but from the face, from the front, you don't see that. So liberating, not to be worrying too much about the width of your seam and so forth. And what you could do then, once you'd made your blocks, is do some decorative stitching on the top if you want to, like I do on my wonky log cabins. In fact, I might do that. So you could then use it as a basis for doing some slow stitching inspired, you know, embellishment on. So go through to the back. Fold to your line and press. And move your pin up if you're using pins. And turn. The next rusty one. Match it up, trim it. I think you get the idea. I think I can talk about something else now, if I can think of something else to talk to you about. Just while I finish this block. Oh, the Isle of Man. Yes, I had an Isle of Man related story, being from, you know, that part of the world, that neck of the woods, as they say. The Isle of Man. My uncle, the man who's married to my aunt, unsurprisingly, well, my mum's sister's husband, yeah. When they got married, he had a stag do. I think that's called like that everywhere, isn't it? You know, when the women have a hen do. I'm not sure if they call it like that in America. You can tell me in the comments, but you know, you go out for one last night out as a single person before you get married, that idea. So my uncle Graham, he's called, went out on his stag do with his friends and had a few pints, as chaps do on their stag do's. And his lovely friends, as a huge joke, bought him a one-way ticket for the Isle of Man ferry and got him on there, somewhat the worse for, you know, the worse for wear, and went away and left him. So he woke up in the Isle of Man with nothing. No money, no return ticket. I don't know how he got back, actually. I must find out. That's a family story. He must have, I don't know. And it was back in the day, so it wasn't like he could just get someone to transfer some money on his mobile or anything like that. There were no mobiles. I must find out how he got back. I shall ask my mum, and if she doesn't know, I shall ask my aunt. Yeah, jolly japes, they say. Poor man. And I also don't know, and must ask for that, if the stag do was the night before the wedding, and if he got back in time for the actual wedding. Sometimes they have stag do's a day or two earlier, just for that exact, in case people get put on the Isle of Man ferry, because it's a 5-something hour ferry journey. So if he was supposed to be getting married that morning, there's no way he would have got back. Yeah, my poor old Uncle Grey. That's too short. I've never actually visited the Isle of Man. I do want to. In fact, I don't think I have. I'll ask my mum. It's possible I have, you know, as a little child, and don't remember. And the other thing the Isle of Man is famous for is the Manx cat. Manx is just what you describe someone or something that comes from the Isle of Man. M-A-N-X, hence Manx quilting. But a Manx cat famously doesn't have a tail. It's a tailless cat. And the Isle of Man also is not English or Irish, and even British is a bit of a stretch. It's its own independent country, self-governing. I do think it is under the crown of now King Charles, who I seem to keep talking about these days. But yeah, it's independent. But yeah, I would like to go there very much. Lots of places I'd like to go. But it seems that since it can be seen from the town of my birth, it is somewhere I should really have been. They also have, I don't know if they still have, because I know there's been a lot of accidents, a rally around the Isle of Man. My uncle, the said Uncle Graham, who got put on the ferry, also used to go there because he was big into motorbikes in his younger days. He used to have Nortons and BSAs. And he was, you know, a real petrol head, as they call them, taking them apart and putting them back together just for the fun of it. And then later in life he got a more comfy bike. I think he got a big BMW type thing when he retired. But then they had an accident that was not his fault. My Auntie Julie did a lot of damage to her knee and was, for a long time, in a lot of pain and had to have various surgeries. They were in traffic, you know, in a traffic jam on the bike, both of them going up to the Lake District, I think. They live up still in the Blackpool area. And a car went to change lane and didn't see them. A great big BMW with 2 people sitting on wearing high-vis. But anyway, people don't see motorbikes, do they? And crushed my poor Auntie Julie's knee. My husband's got a Harley. He's had for some time. In fact, he had a Harley in England, which we brought over with us, and then he's since sold that, but now he's got another one. He couldn't live without it. And so we're very conscious of motorbike awareness, and there's a thing you can do, which is on car journeys with your kids, teach them to count motorbikes, you know, as a game. You know, you've got all those car games. Well, I suppose these days kids sit on their phones, but in the olden times, we used to play all kinds of car games, not card games, but car games, you know, counting how many red houses you saw, or, you know, how many cars with such and such a number plate, or just all kinds of games like that. And if you teach your kids to count motorbikes, it means when they grow up and learn to drive, they will see motorbikes. Through to the back. And then this, oh, no one told me. Oh, you probably were all shouting at me, I just couldn't hear you. I've sewn the wrong colour on, I'll have to get that off. See, I'm keeping it real. I could edit that out, but then you wouldn't have heard my motorbike thing, so I won't. We used to play in the car a game called pub cricket, which is very English because it's got the word pub and the word cricket in it. And that doesn't really work on motorway journeys, it only works on, you know, journeys through villages and so on. Well, Aussies all know about cricket as well, obviously. Because it's very much a sport in Australia. I don't think you play it really in the States, cricket. It's kind of like, it's a bit like baseball, but not really. It's a similar thing, you know, you have a wooden thing and you hit a ball with it, but I think that's probably, and people catch you out and, you know, do fielding, and I suppose it is similar to baseball in a sense. Anyway, pub cricket. So in cricket you score by making runs, like you do in baseball, but instead of running round bases, you run up and down between two wickets, they're called. I need, right, blue. Let me just concentrate and get the right bit of cloth on here. So pub cricket, when you're driving along in the car, if you see a pub, and pub names in England are things like, you know, the King's Head, but then you also have, you know, the Cat and Spider, that would be a good one, because you count the legs of the animals or people in the name of the pub. And that's how many runs you get. That makes sense. So for example, the Cat and Spider, a spider's got 8 legs, a cat's got 4 legs, that makes 12. So if it was your turn, if you were in and you passed a pub called the Cat and Spider, you would get 8 points, 8 runs. And it carries on being your turn until you see a pub with no legs, you know, well, no legs in its name. So the King's Head, for example, there's no legs. A king's got legs, but a king's head does not have legs. You can have endless debates over things like, does the King's Head have legs? But anyway, so then you'd be out and then the next person would be in. The Fox and Hounds is a great one. Usually you agree in advance, if you see a pub called the Fox and Hounds, how many hounds you go with. You know, because a pack of hounds could be any number of hounds. And I think we always pre-agreed that there would be 6 hounds. But still you get 28 runs because 6 fours are 24, plus the fox is another 4. Pub cricket, used to love playing that game. And then you would manipulate if you were sneaky. You'd be on a journey and you would know the journey. It would be a journey that you'd done many times. And you would know that the next few pubs coming up had lots of legs. And so you would wait till, you know, a certain point in the journey, and then you'd propose playing pub cricket and say that you would be in first. So that you got all the points. I must have been a very sneaky child. But anyway, there you go, pub cricket. So this last one now I've got it the right colour, I've got no more fold lines left, I go to the outer edge. And on these last ones, it is especially important that you don't stitch right to the edge, because you'll need to be able to get this top fabric out of the way when you come to join the blocks together. So just be aware of that if you're going to make some blocks now, and not wait till next week for the joiny one as well. You know, some of you might be keen and go making blocks. On the outside strips, make really extra sure that you don't stitch all the way to the end. And also make doubly extra sure that you pick up the right cloth. Just get away with that bit, look. I nearly threw that into the rubbish. Would have been silly because that's still useful. I'm not worrying here that this is coming over the end. I can always trim that off. And Stella's now started snoring. I don't know if you can hear her. She's snoring quite gently at the moment. And this thread's going to run out in a minute. It's funny, I sit here thinking, how did I get onto pub cricket? And then I go and look back, you know, I edit, obviously I go and, well, I try not to cut anything out, edit, but I do like to go and check what I've said and make sure. Sometimes I have to put words on the screen if I've said something wrong. I'm just going to finish this bit off with a couple of back stitches and get a new bit. And then I see my thought process, you know, or I hear my thought process, how I've got from the Isle of Man to pub cricket, for example. Because I don't remember now, I'm just talking, you know, I'm just whittering on. So it's quite interesting to me to then go back and say, oh yeah, that's how I got from there to there. Now it makes sense of a kind. So I look forward to seeing how I got onto pub cricket in a little while when I go and edit. Right, I've got my new bit of thread. Hopefully that'll be enough to finish this block off. Not. See, if you come here, I know I need to go down in there somewhere, so if that's going to be too big a stitch, but there's not room to go in and out again, so I'm just going to have to do smaller stitches. But that's my brain kicking in. You shouldn't let your brain kick in, you should just, autopilot knows what it's doing better than when the brain gets involved, in my case. Except for when I stitch the wrong bit of cloth on. So I'll match that to the outer edge, finger press, and pin. And turn. Now I just need 2 bits of the rust. That bit's just not long enough. I've got more. No worries. No worries. Sorry, taking the mickey. I'm not taking the mickey. I'm imitating Australians very badly. But they do say no worries, don't they? Don't you? I know some Australians are watching. Not all of them, but some. No worries. So when I've just finished these last 2 strips, I'll show you the back and just briefly say about the joining, only so that you'll know if you do decide, like I said, to go ahead and make some blocks before next week, what issues that you may have on the edge. The worst is that you might have to unpick a couple of stitches if you have gone too close, so it wouldn't be the end of the world. And also hand-sewn stitches are not difficult to unpick, are they? Unlike machine stitches, which can be... Oh, which, talking of machine stitching, I must just say while I finish this off, I know many of you do watch Kate at The Last Homely House, but if you don't, or if you missed it, do go and watch, I think it was her last Sunday's video. I'll try and remember to put a link in the description. It's called something like Making a Flying Goose Quilt with My Son John, something like that. I was sitting this morning watching it, and it's hilarious, honestly. It was so loving as well. She filmed it on Mother's Day, which in the UK was a couple of Sundays ago, I think, last Sunday. I lose track of the days. And so he'd come round for Mother's Day, and she teaches him on the sewing machine how to stitch this quilt together. But just the relationship between them and the interaction, and I was laughing till tears ran down my face, literally, because she was teaching him, but at the same time, it was just go and watch it. It's brilliant. Honestly, it really is brilliant. Kate's brilliant anyway, but you know, it was hilarious. But he did make he made a thing. He made a thing, to Kate's credit and his, but I think mostly Kate's. It was just lovely to see their relationship, mother and son. And very northern humour, I think. I don't know. I think it's probably universal, but I associate it with northern humour. Right, got my last log. It's the right colour. But you see, I think I'm even slightly more than ½ an inch now, but it still doesn't really matter. It might affect the distance apart of my lines on the other side of the quilt piece thing, block. But in terms of the front, I'll show you in a minute. Oops. There we go. Nearly there. Talking of car journeys with children, nearly there. Children are always saying, "Are we there yet?" Right. I'll just get that knot away. So do you see here, I'm coming up to the end. I don't want to sew all the way up to there, because at one point when I come to join them together, I'll need to be able to separate the top fabrics from the backing, because you sew this together and then you sew this together. So you need, I would say, even a good ½ inch of leeway. So I'm going to just take, I think, one more stitch there, quite a small stitch, so that I've got a good ½ inch there unsewn. And then I'm going to do a couple of back stitches and cut it off, because that was my last piece. And fold it to the edge. And put a pin in it. So I'll just show you it. So you can see that the width of my logs is pretty universal. That one's slightly wider, I don't know why, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Pretty, you know, all the same. And then if I show you on the back, you see you get these lines of stitching. So you're quilting and piecing at the same time. It's foundation piecing. It's not only known in Manx quilting, it's known elsewhere. But you get this lovely sort of radiating. Well, actually, in the beginning it radiates, but afterwards, oh no, it's radiating. Yeah, of course it is, spiralling out to the edge. And you see the distance between my stitching lines is variable because I wasn't careful about my seams, but I'm not bothered. If you were bothered, then that would be a reason to pay a bit more attention. And then on the corners here, you see those two are completely unsewn, so they're going to be quite easy to get out of the way to do the stitching. Those two also fine. That's the last one where we just finished, where I was sure to finish ½ an inch away from the edge, so I can get the two apart like that. And then those two again are completely away. So the only place you need to worry, don't worry, but you know, is on that very where you finish off. Just make sure you stop a good ½ an inch away from the edge, and that'll be your block done. So there we go. So now I've got my 4 blocks. So next week I shall come back and show you how to join them all together. So I hope you liked Manx quilting and you'll give it a go. And thank you so much for watching as always, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye.